firing squad is normally composed of at least several shooters, all of whom are usually instructed to fire simultaneously, thus preventing both disruption of the process by one member and identification of who fired the lethal shot. Execution by firing squad, in the past sometimes called fusillading, is a method of capital punishment, particularly common in the military and in times of war. Some reasons for its use are that firearms are usually readily available and a gunshot to a vital organ, such as the brain or heart, most often will kill relatively quickly. The prisoner is typically blindfolded or hooded as well as restrained. Executions can be carried out with the condemned either standing or sitting. There is a tradition in some jurisdictions that such executions are carried out at first light or at sunrise, giving rise to the phrase "shot at dawn." Over 1,600 executions have taken place in the United States since the 1970s, and the vast majority have been carried out by lethal injection. More than 160 inmates have died by electrocution and 15 by gas. 5 states, Idaho, Mississippi, Oklahoma, South Carolina, and Utah, allow execution by firing squad, according to DPI. In Mississippi and Oklahoma, the firing squad option is available if nitrogen hypoxia, lethal injection, and electrocution are held unconstitutional or otherwise unavailable. Idaho could become the only state that allows firing squad as its primary form of execution, after a bill passed the state legislature this week. The bill heads to the desk of Republican Governor Brad Little for his signature. Currently, the state allows for a firing squad execution as a backup method if lethal injection drugs are not available. The bill comes after one attempt to execute an inmate via lethal injection failed, with officials unable to set an intravenous line. Mikal Deen Mahdi, who killed Orangeburg officer, chooses firing squad as his execution method. Mikal was born on March 20, 1983. Motti had a chaotic childhood. Motti's mother left when he was 4 years old, and his father told him it was because she had abandoned Motti and later died. 4 years later, Motti watched his father kidnap his mother and try to kill her. Struggling with depression, Motti went to live with his aunt and uncle in Baltimore for several years before returning to Virginia at his father's request. Motti's life was dotted with violent crimes to which prosecutors and judges have pointed in, arguing he would not adapt well to prison life. Motti spent his teenage years, beginning at age 14, in juvenile detention centers for burglaries, vandalism and assault. When Motti was 15, he and his father staged a 9-hour standoff with police who were trying to bring Motti to court for a sentencing hearing. Several years later, when Motti was 18, he stabbed a maintenance worker in Richmond, Virginia, nearly to death. Motti spent 3 years in prison for that crime. About 2 months after his release, he embarked on the crime spree that would land him on death row. On July 14, 2004, Motti stole a pistol, a set of license plates and a station wagon in his hometown of Lawrenceville, Virginia. He would later tell investigators he was fleeing the state after killing a person in a drug deal gone awry, a crime for which he was never convicted. The next day, Motti stopped at an Exxon gas station in Winston-Salem, North Carolina, to buy a beer. While gas station clerk Christopher Boggs, 29, checked Motti's ID, Motti took out a gun and shot Boggs point-blank in the head, then reached over the counter to shoot him again where he lay on the floor. Motti tried and failed to open the store cash register before taking off again, headed to South Carolina. At around 3:30 a.m. on July 18, a driver stopped at the intersection of Bull Street and Washington Street in Columbia. The driver, Corey Pitts, looked down to find a CD in his car, then looked up to find a gun in his face. He later testified in court. Motti took Pitt's red Ford Expedition, replaced its license plates with the ones on the stolen station wagon and drove off. Not long after, Motti stopped at a Hess gas station in Calhoun County, where staff became suspicious as the gas pump rejected Motti's credit cards. The gas station workers called the police, and Motti fled on foot. He ran less than a mile before finding a shed, where he camped out for the rest of the day. At around 7 p.m., Captain James Myers, 56, returned home and drove to his shed, where Motti was hiding. Motti shot Myers 9 times with his own shotgun, then poured diesel fuel on his body and lit him on fire. Motti took Myers' police truck and fled. Police caught Motti in Satellite Beach, Florida, on July 21, 10 days after Myers first left Lawrenceville. Motti pleaded guilty to killing Myers in court 2 years later, right after jury selection for his trial had ended. He later pleaded guilty to killing Boggs as well, for which he was sentenced to life in prison. From July 14 to 17, 2004, Motti committed various crimes across 3 or 4 states, including 2 murders, one of a convenience store worker in North Carolina and another of a police officer in South Carolina. The first time that Motti was allegedly involved in a 2004 murder case in his home state of Virginia, which occurred before the 2 killings in the Carolinas, bringing his total number of suspected murder victims to 3. Usually, death sentences come from a jury's recommendation. In Motti's case, his death sentence was left entirely to Judge Clifton Newman. Motti's murder spree remained one of the most notorious death penalty cases in South Carolina. On June 15, 2009, the South Carolina Supreme Court unanimously dismissed Motti's direct appeal against his death sentence. Given the choice of lethal injection, electrocution and firing squad, Motti chose the lesser of 3 evils. He noted that lethal injection was previously believed to be more humane before it was later determined to be quite tortuous, and that electrocution is cruel since a person is being cooked from the inside out. On April 11, 2025, Mikal Deen Mahdi was executed by firing squad. Mikal Deen Mahdi, 42, was declared dead at 6:05 p.m. minutes after the process started. His execution came 19 years after he was sentenced to death for killing an off-duty Orangeburg officer with his own gun. Motti, wearing a black jumpsuit with a target affixed to his chest, sat strapped to a chair, his arms, legs and shoulders restrained. Leather straps covered his chin and forehead, with enough slack to move if he chose to move his head. But he didn't. Mikal Deen Mahdi made no movement to look at the witness room, where an unnamed member of Myers' family sat alongside the Calhoun County Sheriff, a representative from the solicitor's office that prosecuted him, and one of Motti's lawyers. Unlike other men executed over the last 7 months, Motti gave no final statement. A prison guard placed a hood over Motti's head at 6:01 p.m., then crossed the room and pulled up a shade blocking 3 cubby-like holes in the wall, through which the gunman would shoot. About 30 seconds later, the gunman fired. The bullets pushed the target, a white piece of cloth, into the wound. Witnesses saw little blood on his black jumpsuit. Motti let out a loud groan as soon as the bullets struck him, then took several shallow breaths. He let out several softer groans about 45 seconds later, then let out a low moan. Motti took one final, heaving breath, in which he expanded, then contracted his chest before he stopped moving, witnesses described. A doctor then entered the room and declared Motti dead. His last meal, which he ate Wednesday the 9th of April 2025, was a ribeye steak cooked medium, mushroom risotto, broccoli, collard greens, cheesecake and sweet tea. His execution by firing squad was a horrifying act that belongs in the darkest chapters of history, not in a civilized society. Davis Weiss, an assistant public defender for the Fourth Circuit, said in a statement on behalf of Motti's attorneys. Motti's execution leaves 26 inmates remaining on South Carolina's death row. His execution is expected to be the last in a series of 5 since September. Executions in the state resumed after an unintended 13-year hiatus, caused in part by the state's struggle to get the drugs it needed to carry out lethal injection executions. Legislators added firing squad as an option and made electrocution the default method in 2021, which condemned inmates unsuccessfully challenged in court. Thank you for watching Death Row.